This is House Planning Help episode 48. Hello, I'm Ben Adam Smith, and this is my podcast all about house building and renovating. I'm researching what houses we should be building in the 21st century, and it's my goal to create an energy efficient home before I turn 40 in August 2016. Coming up in this podcast, I chat to eco-columnist Sarah Lonsdale about the small incremental improvements she's made to her house. And it's also going to be fun for me because Sarah visits a wide variety of low energy houses, environmentally friendly houses as part of her writing. So I'm looking forward to that. Thank you for downloading the podcast. I hope you're enjoying all the information we're sharing. I certainly am. Always learning something. And a little while ago, I alluded to the fact that I was hoping to launch a Kickstarter campaign soon. I've actually completed most of the work for that now. We're just waiting for a review from Kickstarter. So I thought I'd fill you in on some of the other details. For example, what's it all about? Well, in episode 26 of this podcast, we chatted to air leakage specialist Paul Jennings, who goes out, he does blower door tests, air tightness testing, and I thought it's very visual what he does, and also very important what he does, gauging the quality of buildings. But air tightness on the whole seems to be the unappreciated factor. I should get the violin out here. The underloved factor which contributes hugely towards making buildings energy efficient. A lot of people tend to know about insulation when it comes to heat loss. I don't think they realise the significance of air tightness. So it'd be great to hammer home that point and to find out about air tightness through Paul's work. We'd be aiming this at people who might be coming in cold, who have no knowledge, and just hopefully they can learn a few bits along the way. It's not going to be too technical, but we will mention those other things, the aspects such as ventilation, having a good strategy there, and moisture control, that you can't just do one of these things. It's not just air tightness and that's it, that you do need some other thought. We'll mention passive house, but that's the idea. So we're going to need your help. Well, I suppose the good thing about crowdfunding is if people don't want it, we don't make it. It's as simple as that. We've put quite a bit of work into making sure that this campaign looks and is going to attract attention because these are important issues, as we're always saying. But we will need your help. At this stage, probably the easiest thing to do would be to get onto our mailing list, and then we can email you when the project goes live. So our address is houseplanninghelp.com/subscribe if you want to sign up there. Let's get into today's interview. It's with Sarah Lonsdale, a journalist who writes all sorts of interesting articles on eco-living. I'm frequently sharing them on the House Planning Help social media pages. When I got chatting to her about doing an interview for this podcast, it was clear that she'd love to build an energy-efficient home or to retrofit a property, but the finances weren't quite there at present. Possibly something that you might be dealing with yourself. Finances they will limit all of us in some way, shape or form. So I thought this was really interesting because it hasn't stopped her from making incremental improvements to her home as and when money becomes available. I started by asking Sarah to explain a little bit about her writing and how she came to focus on environmental issues.
I've always been a journalist ever since I graduated from university and was a news reporter for a number of years until I went freelance to write features when my family came along. And I wrote a wide variety of, I suppose, homes and lifestyle features, property, gardening, food, parenting, all those weekend type features. And I was particularly interested in the environment as I read more and more news reports about climate change. And then there was a very big report put out by Christian Aid in about 2002, which really laid out the impact of climate change, particularly on sub-Saharan Africa, droughts, homelessness, and people being really badly affected by it. And it just really hit home to me. And I thought, as a developed country that has enjoyed a lot of growth through carbon emissions, that there's really a lot we should be doing to lead the way if we want everybody, even developing countries, to start reducing their emissions.
Is it easy to be able to find somewhere, an outlet where you can write about this?
I'm very, very lucky in having my editor of the life section of the Sunday Telegraph. She's very supportive. She doesn't really interfere with what I do, as long as every week I produce a nicely polished story. All my stories are pretty much based around ordinary people doing sometimes extraordinary things, getting on with their lives. And as long as I produce good copy, which is readable and helpful and useful to readers, then she pretty much leaves me alone, actually, which is great.
What have you learned? I don't actually know what length of time you've been doing this, but what have you learned in that time?
I've learned a number of things, particularly how to do things and how not to do things to one's own home when it comes to trying to improve energy efficiency. I've learned that readers, even of fairly conservative newspapers, are actually very, very interested in energy efficiency, particularly obviously from the money-saving point of view, but also from an environmental point of view. But they're really all at sea and lacking information and lacking the confidence to tinker with their homes, particularly if they've got old homes. They're worried about damp. They're worried about what messing around with the fabric of the house will actually do. But they're really interested. I get hundreds of emails from readers saying, "Oh, I read your article. Please, would you let me know how I do this or that?" And that's been really gratifying, actually.
Is there enough information for them? Presumably you don't have to answer all of this. Do you send them off to different resources?
Yes, I send them off to different resources, websites like Green Spec or the Green Building Store. But it's actually the information they need comes even before the kinds of material they need. They just need somebody to sit down and hold their hand through the process. Nobody even knows really where to start. Sometimes they don't even know where their drafts are coming from. They don't know whether their walls are cavity wall insulation or solid wall. There's still an awful lot there that people don't know about how their homes work, what thermal bridging is, all that kind of thing that really these days people need to know if they're going to start making their homes more efficient.
I have to say that I enjoy reading your articles, and I find it very hard sometimes to source appropriate content that I feel people that follow House Planning Help will enjoy, but I never struggle with you, which is why I wanted to interview you. And we've settled on a topic which is quite interesting, and I imagine a lot of people will feel like they are in this category. So you wanted to... Well, what would you do if you could do anything in terms of building your own house or retrofitting an existing property? Let's say the sky's the limit.
If the sky was the limit, I would start from scratch. I would build probably some kind of hoof house or passive house building. I live myself in an old 1920s drafty home. At first I thought I loved it, lovely character, original fireplaces, original characters. But actually, having visited beautiful eco homes for the last 5 to 10 years, I'm really jealous, and I'd love to live in an airtight passive house.
Okay, you and me then, we're here together. So not being able to do that straight off, you never know, hopefully in the next couple of years or wherever life will take you, but you've tackled a certain number of aspects of your house and put together a top 30, which I think probably will make into a top 10, but I wonder whether you can just talk us through where are we going to start, at 10 or 1? I suppose we should finish on 1, but does that ruin up the numbering system that you put here?
Yes, I mean, it's a fairly random list, to be honest. I mean, the first thing we did was put in cavity wall insulation. Although it's a 1920s house, it does have a cavity. That did work very well. In fact, we noticed that on our fuel bills. Pretty much the winter after we did it, the house felt generally warmer and the bills were lower. However, I think that it's probably, we used blown glass fibre, and I think it must have settled a bit because I'm just feeling that it's not giving the kind of rewards that we initially enjoyed. And I think that's one of the problems with cavity wall insulation. I think that the techniques and the products have changed a lot, even in the last 15 years since I've been in this house. And I think I would, if I could afford to, I would rip it out and start again with these polystyrene balls. I think they're much better. They don't settle, and they're also inert. So that's one thing I think it has really helped, but I think even in 15 years, technology has moved on. So that's the first thing we did.
Let me stop you there because I have a quick question. Is there any risk of filling cavities?
There have been reports, particularly of cavities filled in the 70s and 80s, where the material they used, it was a expanding foam, which then hardened, and that has occasionally caused damp problems. However, in recent years, the types of materials that have come onto the market are much better. They take into account the possible damp problems. There are still areas of the country, particularly where you have driving rain coming from the west, up on the west coast of Scotland, for example, where cavity wall insulation is not recommended because of the possible damp problems. But now in most of the country, if you use the latest materials, there shouldn't really be an issue at all.
Next on the list.
Next on the list was, as I say, this house was incredibly drafty, and we would sit in the living room at night and the doors would creak and there would be funny noises as things moved around. So what we did is we internally insulated the living room with sheep's wool insulation. And then on the top of that, we put a rather beautiful tongue and groove boarding all the way round. And it's really snug. It's the warmest room in the house. We also changed the open fireplace to a very super efficient wood burner. And that room is as snug as anything now. And it doesn't let out any heat at all. It doesn't seem, it gets very hot in the evenings, actually, if we have a wood burner.
I get concerned with internal insulation. So what preparation did you do for that to know that it wasn't going to cause any damage to the external wall? Because presumably that would get colder.
Well, we did a lot of investigation and we didn't want to use anything synthetic in the living room just because we were slightly concerned about what putting synthetic materials against the wall would do. So that's why we ended up with sheep's wool insulation. It's naturally thermally efficient. It's supporting Cumbrian hill farmers, and it's also it absorbs moisture and then lets it go when the air around it gets dry. And it's a wonderful natural material, and so we were very happy to be using that. There has been, I know some readers have written to me saying that they've used sheep's wool insulation in some cases and they've had moth infestations. We used a sheep's wool insulation that had been treated with anti-moth treatment and we haven't had any problems at all. And then the wood panels, they're breathable again and we painted them with breathable paints. We've never had any problems with build-up of moisture on the outside wall.
How did you target that area as somewhere that you wanted to do this improvement on?
Well, I actually took advice from well-known green Donica McCarthy, who said to me, I went to interview him very early on when I started writing my columns, and he said to me, if you only have the money to insulate one room, make it your living room where you spend most time, particularly in the evenings, because you can always withdraw into there, and then once it's bedtime, just run as fast as you can under your duvet. And so that's what we thought we would do. We'd start off, we didn't have very much money, we had little kids, always a drain on the purse, and we thought, right, let's do the living room, let's make it really nice and snug, and then we can always withdraw into that room in cold winters, have the wood burner on, and it's worked a treat.
Do you want to continue on down the list?
So I would say the next thing was our new loft. We put in a loft bedroom when we first moved in. That was back in 1999. I didn't know anything really about insulation then. I wish I had known much more because it was a very flimsy construction, literally kind of a wooden shed on our roof, and it's been absolutely freezing. One of the best things we did about 3 years ago was to go around the entire walls of the room and put Celotex insulation and then plasterboard and also tongue and grooving as well, so it looks like a lovely little snug cabin. And it's changed that room from being unbearably cold in the winter to again really snug, really warm, and it really retains the heat now.
And are you ever concerned about ventilation, or because the rest of the house is so leaky it's not really something that would cross your mind?
The rest of the house is still quite leaky, but we also have ventilation. There's a bathroom up there as well, and we have ventilation there. We also have the good old-fashioned open a window, and we've never had damp problems up there.
Okay, next.
Sometimes really simple things help. So we have a north-facing hallway, north-facing porch, and although it is well insulated, we've had an issue with cold coming right through the front door. We've tried to insulate the front door, but the letterbox, again, lets in cold air. And so really simply, we did two things. The first thing we did was we put in a door between the porch and the hallway. It was a properly insulated door, and we took out the single pane and put in double glazing. And it's made the most incredible difference. We also had a thermostat. We had, and another thing I would recommend is the boiler. We changed it to a condensing boiler, and we had a thermostat for the first time in its life. This house had a thermostat. Now, prior to having the door between the hall and the porch installed, the thermostat, which was in the hallway, kept dropping in temperature 18, 17, 16 degrees when the rest of the house was perhaps 19, 20, 21 degrees. And so the boiler kept coming on unnecessarily. What having the door did was make that hall area much, much warmer. And so now the boiler comes on far, far less. And it's really, really made a huge difference to our recent fuel bills to have that door there for both those reasons.
What's giving you the ideas of these areas? Is it where you perceive there to be the coldest, most effective places? How did you come up with these solutions?
Well, the hallway was just really, really cold, and much colder than the south-facing back part of the house. Other things, obviously, as part of my job, I've had interviews with an awful lot of people who know what they're talking about. Parity Projects, for example, is a great retrofit company. They came round and did a survey of my house. I had another company who came round with a thermal imaging camera, which was really useful, and I would recommend that if anyone's thinking of having some retrofit work done. Get a thermal imaging camera. You can really see, for example, we found that there were huge gaps in the insulation in an extension roof that we had put in about 10 years ago. And it really helps you target where you want to put the work. If you don't have the money to do a whole house retrofit all in one go, which is probably the best thing to do, but can be quite expensive. I should think 25 to 50,000 pounds, depending on the type of project. And so if you're doing it like we did it piecemeal, it's very useful to have somebody who knows what they're doing come to take pictures, come to do draft tests, that kind of thing in your house.
We're probably about halfway through the list, but we haven't really been keeping track, so I'm hoping you have. Are we about halfway through?
I should think we're about halfway through. One thing I want to talk about is windows. We've got an awful lot of windows in the house. When we moved in, they were all single-paned steel Crittall windows. I've still got a few left. They're pretty awful. They're very drafty. They've all gone out of shape. I mean, they're 80, 90 years old now. And so we've tried an awful lot of different types of windows. One thing we did try, first of all, before I really got the hang of the energy efficiency thing, was just replacement steel-framed Crittall windows. They look beautiful, they look like the real thing, but there's a cold bridge all the way around where the metal frame is, and that really didn't work, and we got a lot of black mould, particularly on the bedroom windows where we did that, which showed that it was very, very cold there. But then we put in some triple glazed windows in the north-facing side of my children's bedrooms. That worked incredibly well, really, really good, really snug, but obviously pretty expensive. They were about £2,500 each. So when we ran out of money, we got a carpenter to put fixed secondary glazing in our other north-facing windows. And I would say that's worked almost as well as the new windows. Aesthetically, not particularly as beautiful as brand new timber-framed triple glazed windows, but they do the job. It was only about 160 quid per window, and for the moment that's what we're using, and it's worked really well.
Has this budget become available to you over time? Is that how you're doing this, or did you think at the beginning, we've got this pot of money to spend over whatever period?
No, it's really ad hoc. Just when we've got a bit of spare cash, if, say, we've been on holiday in Scotland rather than abroad one year, we might have had a bit more money. It's really been as and when we've found the money to do it. Occasionally we've remortgaged, so to do the loft work, that was about £5,000, and we actually took out some money on the mortgage to do that. But with kids, you never have any spare cash, so it's really been as and when we've found the money to do it.
I've got a kid on the way. I don't like the sound of that. Okay, our next one.
Okay, so the children's playroom, well, it was the playroom, now it's really their homework room and music room. Very cold northeast corner of the house, and we haven't replaced the windows there. So what we did, we had floorboards which looked very beautiful, but actually, in fact, it was Roger Hunt, the green writer. I interviewed him, and he told me that if you put all the holes in the floorboards, between floorboards together, you kind of make a great big open window in the floor of your room. And I'd never looked at it like that before, and it was just so obvious, such common sense. So what we did is we found a really thick thermal underlay made out of recycled car tyres, and then we put down a really thick woolen carpet, and it's made an enormous difference. I thought about lifting the floorboards and putting insulation between the joists, but really it was just far too expensive. But we've minimised the drafts, and we've also stuck a brilliant thing called a chimney sheep up the chimney, which is an open fireplace there.
Did you say a chimney sheep?
Yes, it's a fabulous invention by a woman who lives in Cumbria, and it's a thick mat of felted wool, and you measure your chimney void, and you literally just shove it up, and the drafts have just gone to nothing. So that's a really nice, simple, very cheap. It was 20 quid thing that we did. The next one I would say is the design of the house has quite big dormer cheeks in the north-facing side of the house in my children's bedrooms. I'd never really thought about that, and actually it was when Parity Projects came round and did a report on the house. They said, have you noticed they're only a little bit of timber and a little bit of plaster, and that was it. And so no matter how much we improved the windows in the children's bedrooms, they still felt very cold. So we took out the old plaster, we put in thick Celotex and then replastered. And even though I would say the square footage of those dormer cheeks, I would say it's only about 12 square foot. It's actually made an enormous difference because it's on the north-facing side of the house. And that's a really good example of where ordinary homeowners just don't think of that kind of thing. It's a small area. It's something that you wouldn't even notice, but actually being given the right sort of advice can make a real difference.
Okay. So I've just been totting up, and I think we've completed 8 now. Number 9?
Number 9 would be getting rid of an old back door that was never used, that was drafty. And so we literally just boarded the whole thing up. We stuck some insulation between the door and the boards. We replaced the window with a double glazed window. And again, it was a small area. It was probably about 4 foot by 7 foot. You would walk along the wall, and where you found that back door, you walked past the back door, you could feel the drafts playing around your feet. And then you walked a bit further on and the draft stopped. So again, just making use of common sense, and just also, that was a very, very simple thing. I think it was a kind of DIY job, plus we got a glazer in. It cost us about 50 quid, and it's made an enormous difference just in the comfort of the kitchen.
Let's have our final one then, number 10.
Our final one, I would say, is thermal window coverings for those beautiful period windows that you don't want to lose. We've got some Crittall windows that we either haven't been able to afford or haven't really wanted to replace. And so what we've done is we've had thermal triple-lined window coverings, either blinds or curtains, and that you just close the night air away, you pull down the blinds, you close the curtains. Again, it's a very easy win. It's not particularly expensive. We've only done it when we needed to replace the curtains anyway. and it's really helped keep the heat in. This old house, all its radiators are underneath windows, and so the heat just goes straight out of those windows. This way we help retain a lot more of the heat, and it's very, very snug and very simple, easy win.
You've actually put together a list of 30 different items, and we'll put that up on the website on the show notes for this particular episode. Just as we wind up then, have you changed your lifestyle or anything else that is worth mentioning how you live in this house?
I think we have. We're all very aware of things like recycling, which we never were before. We compost, we grow our own potatoes, we give lots of our vegetable scrapings to the rabbit, who then provides us with lovely straw for the compost, which works very well. Plus, he's a much loved member of the family. I've also done an awful lot, not just in terms of energy efficiency, but ecological changes to the way I live. I make my own kitchen cleaners now, using borax substitute and vinegar and a bit of essential oil, so I don't have to keep buying plastic containers every month. So yes, I do. Although, we're normal people, we don't wear sandals and knit our own spaghetti or whatever. We're just a normal family who's just trying to do our bit to reduce the amount of waste we produce, to reduce the amount of resources that we use from this planet.
Sarah, thank you very much for all the information today. It's been great to meet you.
Good to meet you too, thanks.
You can find today's show notes at houseplanninghelp.com/48, where we have Sarah's entire list of the 30 improvements she's made to her house, plus a picture of the house and some of the measures that she's taken. And also we have links to Sarah at The Telegraph and on Twitter. But I found that really inspiring, particularly she's clearly busy and she's doing what she can in terms of lifestyle and also improving the house. So I have a question as well in the show notes, and that is, what improvements have made the biggest difference in your home? If you've undertaken anything like Sarah, some of the smaller things, I would like to hear about them. So pop that into the show notes at the bottom, houseplanninghelp.com/48. My call to action today is, do you fancy taking part in one of our Google Plus Hangouts? It's just a bit of fun, really, a chance to talk about topics that you're passionate about. That is the key criteria. You don't need to be an expert, but you just need to have some views and be interested and really want to make houses energy efficient. So we've got a topic list. If you head to houseplanninghelp.com/hangouts, and that will tell you more about it and how you can get involved. Next time, David Rudlin from Urbed is my guest as we look at collective custom build. I hope you can make it for that one. Cheers.